Well, look, both of you, thank you very much for dialing in today and to helping with this, and welcome to everybody on the call. Hopefully we're really excited about the next 45 minutes to an hour. We're going to have a good conversation with both Ian and Seb with regards to how EIS can fit into your ESG and impact propositions out to your clients, and really obviously leading into talking about the Impact EIS service that we offer. There is an important information slide which I've been instructed I'm not allowed to skip over, so I'm going to just show that to you all now quickly. And here is our agenda for what we're planning on covering today. Ian, Seb, could I just ask you guys to introduce yourselves at this stage, and just, Ian, if I start with you, just provide a bit of an introduction to yourself.
Yeah, sure, Jack. For those who don't know me, I'm a partner at Triple Point. I'm head of the venture team. I've been with Triple Point for 12 years now, probably a bit more. I've always been heavily involved in the EIS and VCT side of the business. Before Triple Point, I was involved for 20 years with institutional investment management and research with businesses like Mercury Asset Management and UBS. That's probably enough from me.
And I'm Seb. I work with Ian in the ventures team, originating, doing the deals, sitting on the boards, managing the portfolio, living and breathing day to day what's happening with our companies and our investors.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, look, thank you both of you, and to everyone on the call. Sorry, the sun is shining right in my eyes as I'm trying to do this, which poorly timed for this portion of the day, and I don't have a blind to block it, so I keep myself ducked down. But purpose of today, as I said, we're gonna cover off a bit of the background to Triple Point for anyone on the call that isn't familiar with us. I'm touching on a little bit of the background to impact and ESG. What it means, where it all fits. How that's framed in a wider market before coming onto our service. Talking about the current portfolio, we're very much going to run this as a conversational piece between the three of us and using the slides as a guider in the background. Please do feel free to ask questions, pop them into the chat box. We'll do our best to address them as we go through it. And without further ado, I'm going to pick up with Ian first, if that's okay. Just specifically, I think there's going to obviously be a few people on the call that may or may not be familiar with Triple Point as a business itself. I always think that's a really, really good place to start. Perhaps, given you're a partner in the business, get you to give us a bit of a background to who Triple Point are.
Yeah, and just on this slide, Jack, just to say that even beyond the Impact EIS service, which we're talking about today at Triple Point overall, we do focus not just on the financial returns, but also on how the investments and the business impact people and the environment. And I just wanted to mention that we have recently applied to become a B Corporation, which is, for those who don't know, is a well-regarded kind of certification for businesses that do want to commit to consider the impact of their investment and other decisions on the environment and workers, as well as on profit. I don't know if we'll get that designation, but certainly this time, but certainly it's our attempt to achieve it in due course.
Just I was going to ask, just because obviously we have an extensive track record in what we do with regards to EIS, but we're also one of the key proponents behind social investment tax relief, which obviously is a precursor and kind of underpins a lot of our thinking with regards to the EIS, would you say?
Good point. Yes, I think we were the only actual fund management institutional fund manager that also had a product using SITA some years back. So we were early into this. Yeah.
And EIS, obviously, our track record goes back, a long time before, the launch of the Impact EIS service. That was obviously focused more towards the renewable energy side of things. Correct?
That's right. So if you actually, Jack, if you pop onto the next slide, there's a little bit about that down at the bottom, which is, we have been in EIS for a long time, 15 years or so. Yeah. It's worth saying that Triple Point originally was started as a VCT business and then went into EIS as its second product a long time ago. And only kind of later on did we move into some of these other strategies that are there. So we did start out as an investment house for private investors, but these days we have money under management as well from institutional investors, of course, but also actually the UK government as well, across those business lines mentioned there, that like the leasing and lending, the infrastructure, and the social housing, as well as the venture capital. And just last week, I should mention, we also announced our intention to list a new strategy, which is a digital infrastructure fund, which is going to list on hopefully going to list on the LSE in due course. So, while we've managed different EIS investments for many years, today, we are focusing on the Impact EIS. And just to say that I know you can give a few more details of it later, but it is now a £12 million fund. We've already made 13 investments, and those investments are already having a measurable positive impact on society, as well as growing their revenues rapidly for investors.
Yeah, I think the interesting point for me as well is, people talk to our wider corporate culture, and obviously, the Impact EIS and what we're going on to talk about, has huge underpinnings and not just, with regards to ESG policy, but going into kind of, a much more, I'm struggling to find the right word here, but a step forward with regards to the impact of it. And we'll go on to explain a little bit to that. But it flows throughout all of our investment strategies. I mean, you picked up on the digital infrastructure fund. I mean, that it's called D9 for a reason, being linked to the UN SDGs, which we'll touch on in a bit. And, the heat networks and everything that we do, has got good social, and impact links across the business, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of what we did always had a positive social impact. To be fair, in the beginning, that was almost by accident, but we've tried very hard to bring that to the fore of our business in the recent years. Absolutely.
And I think coming on to it, it's one of those things. I often have a lot of people who ask me kind of where does it sit? What's the difference between, talk to us through the transition from kind of, ESG and SRI all the way through to what we do on impact. And I think actually crucially how that isn't and differentiates itself from, philanthropic, charity style of giving.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a continuum here. So 20 years ago, at least 20 years ago, but that's when I can remember it becoming an issue, some investors kind of started taking an increasing interest in socially responsible investing, or SRI, which is mainly what it was known as then, which was aimed at screening out some of the kind of obvious social ills from portfolios, tobacco, firearms at the most basic level.
Yeah.
And then in more recent years, ESG, which is short for environment, social and governance issues, has really become the more popular term. And today there are a lot of ESG indices and funds that run off the back of looking at those indices, mainly for listed investments, they're still mainly screening out investments that are deemed not to meet certain standards in these areas.
And what kind of standards would you just typically are you looking for when you're talking about ESG?
Well, it might be whether you source your products in an ethical way, or whether you're sourcing them from places where people are working in sweatshops or whatever. That's had a bit of publicity in the UK recently. Yeah. It's been a bit of a debating point. And then on the governance, I mean, that's social in a way, but it's also governance, the way that you run your company and you treat your workers, as well as your shareholders. These sorts of issues. And while a lot of the ESG these days is still, I think, screening out rather than sort of positively picking companies, I think there is a view amongst investors increasingly that addressing these issues can reduce the underlying business risk for a company, because they can get into trouble with their customers or the regulators if they do ESG properly. So
then how does that flow into ultimately impact investment?
Yeah, so then the next step really is impact investing, which is aiming to make investments that make a positive social or environmental contribution rather than just avoiding doing damage. Of course, crucially, and we'll talk about this as well, we're still looking for financial returns in impact investing. Impact investing has been a growing trend for a number of years, but more with institutional investors and family offices who want to say that they are not only doing well financially, but also want to do some good. And what the Impact EIS service is doing is making that type of impact investing, that type of socially responsible investing available to individual investors. I just want to mention something that you said at the beginning, just to be clear. There could be another box on the right of this slide, which would be philanthropic investment. We're not doing that. We're not doing charitable or philanthropic investment where the main point of the investment is the impact and investors are willing to compromise their financial returns or possibly even surrender them altogether. With our impact investing, we are looking for both a positive social contribution and a positive financial return.
Yeah, I was going to bring out that point because it's often something that I get asked about, and I think there is a degree of confusion to that, where people kind of assimilate impact investment, where there is some kind of trade-off between your investment performance and the social good that you're delivering, i.e., by doing this, you're somehow sacrificing investment performance. And I'm guessing you don't see it like that at all.
No, I mean, we've done a lot of research on this, and there is a lot of evidence that actually pursuing companies that have a positive social impact in the sectors that Seb's going to talk about in a minute also provides just as good, if not possibly better, financial returns than not doing so. So there's no evidence that pursuing this strategy will damage financial returns in that sense. And one thing that we might also touch on again later is that because in a number of instances these companies are addressing big social challenges, they're also by definition addressing big end product markets. So if they get it right, there's an opportunity for them to do very well in those markets.
Absolutely. I think it's a good opportunity to bring Seb in if he's still with us. I can't see either of you, which is really off-putting that I can't.
Is there somewhere?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
It's very quiet, which is unlike me, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. It would be good. It would be good to just provide some background, I think, Seb, to everybody on the call with regards to how we frame this in a wider context. Yeah,
that's really interesting. So people may be familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are on the screen at the moment. There's 17 of them, and they were agreed in 2015 by the United Nations member states, and effectively they were a sort of path, a call to action to end various high-level problems around the world by 2030, particularly poverty and protecting the planet. And they have now being used increasingly by the investment community as a lighthouse, a sort of guidance on how one can do various things in the economy and have long-term positive social impact. With that in mind, in 2017, when we set up the Impact EIS service, we thought very hard about what Ian said there about investing with impact rather than, as some people say, for impact. So we're really focusing on the financial return with impact. And we thought, well, how can we frame our investment thesis? How can we ensure that we're investing in companies that are exciting, that also deliver great returns, that have big markets? And in order to create the investment thesis that sits behind the Impact EIS service, we looked at the 17 SDGs that the UN agreed. And from that, we're inspired to create sort of 4 themes, and they're the themes that we invest by in the Impact EIS service. So they're on the screen now, and effectively companies that we invest in not only have very high growth potential, that's a requirement, as we are ultimately a venture capital fund, but they fit within one of these mandates. So for example, it might be a medical business or an education business that through its business, through growing and doing well for its investors and its community, it also benefits the wider world in some way. And we will go on to talk in a little bit about some of those companies that we've invested in and how they fit within these 4 themes. They're quite wide themes and they cover more than one. We've highlighted on the slide just, a few of the key SDGs that are affected by the goals, but actually around 11 of the 17 are touched on in some way by these 4 goals. And the best way to think about this is when you're investing or your clients are investing in Impact EIS, what sort of companies are they going to get in their portfolio? And these 4 themes give you that sort of those railroads, a sort of idea about what we're looking to invest in. And on the next slide, actually, it just talks a little bit about, we've got a little Venn diagram, I think, if I don't think this, yeah.
Has it flashed up?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, just a little bit. But, guys, this slide is just I know it's appreciated. It's a nice bit of decoration, but it really serves well for explaining quite quickly what we're looking for within those 4 themes. And so the purpose is obviously the theme. If it's got a positive educational impact, so for example, One Business MWS Technologies, it has a very positive impact on apprenticeships, but it's also attacking a very large market that was made by the apprenticeship levy. So there's large scope for growth. And naturally, obviously, there's the EIS benefits of the EIS service, ranging from the capital gains rollover and the income tax relief to the long-term capital gains free potential growth. So that's in its core what your clients or you would be looking at getting in the portfolio you put together for you.
I guess the interesting point for me, Seb, and it comes back to kind of framing it again into that wider context, that there is the market around impact investment has grown dramatically over the last few years, and it ties back to that kind of where we stand as a business, which is, and you just did it just there, looking for large, big societal challenges because of the market opportunity that it presents to itself. And I think you just touched on that with obviously the market that MWS is trying to address. We're looking to find these big societal challenges because there's a large addressable market which presents a large addressable opportunity for us. It's that kind of virtuous circle.
Yeah, and I mean just take one theme, like for example inequality. On its face, you might think, well, what is inequality for the purposes of Triple Point investing in the Impact EIS service? And equality expands a huge range of things. And one major area of deep inequality still in the developed world, as well as the developing, is financial inequality, the ability for knowledge or the ability to understand where you can invest. And you see businesses, very large businesses that have got to scale, like Nutmeg, or businesses that like Moneybox, which, whilst not right for the type of customer that's coming into Impact EIS, the high net worth, for many people in the population, they had an unequal access to an understanding of the potential places they can put their money in. So these sorts of products fit within inequality. And within health, obviously, you've got, particularly in post-COVID, you've seen how unequal it is for those who can and can't leave the home based on what condition they're in. If they need to see a GP, telemedicine services, a very large market, but also democratizing access to the GP in a dangerous time. So these markets are large and are very large and exciting. And
comes with it the opportunity for us to not only do social good, but to obviously generate investment performance for our investors.
Yeah, which is obviously number one. Yeah.
One of the criticisms that I think has been, not criticism, but one of the ambiguities perhaps, or areas of haziness for people, is really like, what do you mean by social impact and how do you measure it? Because quite often people don't really can you measure this? How do you measure this? And to that end, I don't know, Ian, can I pick up with you here, or is this something, Seb, you'd like to take forward? Because I think it is really, really important to explain, when we say impact, it's something that to us is measurable. We can define that.
Yeah, no, I'll pick this one up. So the 5 points that are on here, where it says we measure social impact based on these criteria, those are what we look at before we decide to make the investment. So, I mean, obviously we've got our 4 themes, which helps to narrow the universe in a bit, but it still leaves, a huge continuum in terms of levels of social impact that a business might have. So some of these points that we're looking at, the scale of the social issue involved. So what we mean by that is, just how big is this problem? So obviously a company that's helping to address unemployment, and we have one of those in the portfolio, is going to be looking at a much bigger problem, a more compelling issue than, say, a company that we looked at recently, which was improving social engagement between universities and their students. The latter might still be of interest to us, but in terms of scoring the impact, obviously the one dealing with the bigger problem is going to be pretty clear there. And then, the company's own ability to address the issue. I think this gets down to how scalable the product is and whether they have, intellectual property involved in this. Talk about that a little bit later on in terms of the environment sector, where we found it a bit more challenging to find companies where we felt the solution was as scalable as, say, compared to, say, in healthcare, where we found it a bit easier.
And it also, Ian, sorry to interrupt, it also is the team, isn't it? Because like Beam, for example, and the way that he had a very deep network in the government to help homeless people find jobs. If you're not the right team with, the right wherewithal to make that product work, then your ability to address the issue is obviously reduced.
Yeah, very, very good point. The founders are crucial for the impact, as well as for assessing whether you think the business is really going to be able to grow.
And Ian, this process that you are outlining here in terms of how we assess and are looking to measure social impact, runs at the same time in conjunction with what we're doing with regard to the investment analysis on a business and the kind of the
Yeah, absolutely. So and this forms part of the investment paper on the company that we'll take to the Triple Point Investment Committee, and they'll look at this as well. I mean, at this stage, it's not being overly scientific. It is a scoring system based on our judgment of the issues, but it does give us a framework to work with. And I guess the other couple of things there are the characteristics of who's actually affected. So, is it having an impact on working conditions in less developed countries, or is it helping the British middle class save money on their energy bills? These are the sort of things that we're thinking about, and particularly innovation. We always like to see intellectual property in a business, and whether it's truly an innovative and revolutionary result. And the final point there is, what TP Triple Point can add. I mean, obviously we're adding money, but can we add something else to the business in terms of Triple Point's wider relationships in a number of sectors, like health infrastructure and social housing?
I was going to say that talks slightly to our advisory committee that sits around the ventures team, correct?
That's absolutely right. So we have specifically have 3 people who are on our advisory committee just for this product, and 2 of them are experienced founder entrepreneurs who've also been through the venture capital process themselves as well. And one of them, Henry Carlton, is an experienced healthcare entrepreneur. Is very helpful with us, both in terms of selecting businesses to invest in, but also being involved after we've invested as well. And the other is Michael Wood, who's a fintech entrepreneur who's been involved in running strategy sessions for some of our investments, post-investments. So yeah, they are also a helpful contribution to the mix.
I think the important thing for me is to bring it to life, in terms of the numbers, that are created. And I don't know, are there any in here that you particularly, I this is one of my favorite pages, and I love reading these kind of statistics, but are there any particular favorites that you'd like to draw out here in terms of some of the numbers that matter?
Can I draw one out?
Yeah, you go for it.
Yeah, I particularly like the thrift example, not just because the number is a lot of money given to charity, mainly from people, from a source that it wouldn't have gone to charity otherwise, but what Thrift does, and we'll talk about Thrift in a minute, is it allows you to donate your clothes to them, and they then sell them online in a secondhand store, thrift.plus, www.thrift.plus. And a third of the revenue from those clothes goes to charity, which means that the average charity shop, which, by the way, less than 1% of charities in the UK have charity shops, full stop, but it allows any charity to receive proceeds of clothes, and it receives 30% of the value, whereas charity shops only receive normally, based on their margins, about 20% of the value of clothes sold. So it removes the need, Thrift, that not only is it donating a lot of money to charity, a lot more charities than can ever be serviced on the high street, but it removes the need to have charity shops, because you can sell through the website and make more. The charity makes more money on a per pound sold basis. So I think that's a particularly compelling example of, you know, something we all do day to day that has a you know, big impact.
Jack, I want to squeeze in another two.
you go for it. You pick up the number. Go for it. What are you choosing?
No, just actually, some of the numbers are a couple of months out of date on here, but just on the top left one there, which is talking about healthcare, credentially, just a couple of the investments we're not going to talk about more later on. So just to give them a bit of a shout out at the moment. Credentially is one that they've got a cloud-based recruitment platform for health professionals, and they helped speed the appointment last year of over 1,000 health professionals, specifically into COVID-related functions in 2020. They gave the product away for free for a bit in Q2 when COVID was first rampant, and actually by doing that, they not only helped the NHS, but they got a lot of attention into their own product, and their own sales picked up a lot after that. And the other one, just that I might just mention, it's also a healthcare one. Sometimes the healthcare ones are a bit easier to talk about, but the bottom left there is Skin Analytics. That's a portfolio company that uses artificial intelligence to screen photographs of skin lesions for cancer. And by doing that, as I say, it's a little bit out of date. They saved £50,000 for the NHS in unnecessary dermatologist appointments just in Q4 last year. So that's the sort of metrics we can pick up on. Sometimes they, if possible, we will try and put a monetary value on them. It's not easy, and we're not saying it's totally a science. We do take external advice on how to do that. If we can, we will. It's not always possible, but if we can, we will try and put a monetary value on the impact.
I think this is a really nice part of what we do with regards to our investors, isn't it? In terms of actually not just reporting back financial performance, but, you know, increasingly for investors where this forms a core part of their interest and their objectives when they're setting out their plans, is actually to be able to demonstrate the impact, the measurable impact that their investments are having on society.
Yeah.
Coming onto our service a little bit, and I don't know if you guys would like me to just take this forward for just a minute and just provide.
Yes, please.
Thought you might say that. Just a quick introduction to the service. You know, Seb has already mentioned the 4 key themes that we look to invest around. But in essence, you know, once we've done that, we're looking to build a portfolio of between 6 and 10 companies for any investor coming into a tranche. You know, we're looking to get them fully deployed within 12 to 18 months of doing so. You know, the real driver for us, as we said, you know, this is about delivering financial returns. You know, I don't want people confusing it with some kind of philanthropic investment where there's no ambition or hope for investment returns. This is very much, you know, still venture EIS investment, but we're overlaying that with, you know, the mandate to deliver measurable social impact as well. You know, and, you know, importantly, you know, and it will come to life as we pick out a couple of company examples. You know, it's providing that scale up capital to businesses, you know, that are revenue generating, that they've had, you know, minimum viable products, you know, they've got proof of concept. You know, we are providing the scale capital exactly where the UK government have kind of targeted EIS legislation into providing that scale up capital into the funding gap of businesses across the UK. You know, it's something that now more than ever, you know, we really need to support, you know, that bedrock of our economy. kind of dialing back in, because most people did not dial in to hear me. You can do that at the best of times. Getting both of you to talk about our current portfolio. And Ian, can I pick on you again, if that's all right? And just, perhaps, actually inequality and health have got a number of investments in them, but you certainly seem more so than environment and children and young people. I'm just wondering if you had a comment to that about, where the balance lies in those two versus the other two.
Yeah, well, the slide's sort of self-explanatory. The 13 logos of the investments we have at the moment into those themes or baskets that Seb was talking about earlier. And yes, there are more in health and inequality than in the environment and children and young people. It just lets me touch on something else in terms of the way that we look at this. We see more opportunities in healthcare which are knowledge intensive or software intensive, and therefore, in our view, they can achieve very high returns on capital if they succeed. And in a kind of knowledge intensive, software intensive business, if you succeed, you can scale your impact much more significantly. So companies like Skin Analytics and Credentially that I mentioned earlier. In environments, we see a lot of opportunities, but many of them are more capital intensive, such as developing new hardware products or manufacturing processes, which not all of which, but many of which we often end up concluding are somewhat more of a kind of a moonshot than some of the software processes. And also, to be successful will involve a lot more capital deployment. But having said that, we have found a couple of great environment-related investments that actually we're going to talk about in a second. But just before that, on the inequality, as Seb said, inequality captures quite a lot of things. So not just really sort of employment opportunities inequality, which is what something like Beam captures, but we have an investment in We Are Digital, which is much more about inequality in terms of access to knowledge about IT. And they had a good year in 2020 because banks, for example, wanted to get more and more of their older customers onto their digital apps, and all the people were struggling with that, and one or two of the banks paid We Are Digital to train their customers. But yeah, that's why we are aiming for a balance, if possible, between the themes, but we won't be totally wedded to that, depending on the business opportunities that we see, Jack.
Okay. Seb, I know I'm going to ask you to pick on a company to talk through. I think it's Thrift, isn't it? Because I know that because the next slide is a little.
Next slide is, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah. Here's one we made earlier. So coming into this, and before we do it, I'm going to try my best to make sure that technology works here. I just think to break up the medium of us talking, perhaps try and show a video. Bear with me. Hopefully this all works seamlessly. It might not, and it could be a disaster.
Fingers crossed.
Do we have sound?
We have vision.
I don't have any sound on my end. Maybe the video never came with sound. Or maybe... Yeah, this is...
I mean, maybe Seb could just talk us through what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could. Seb. I could. Although we've now gone ahead, people are probably saying, well, what happened at the beginning? So Thrift is one of our portfolio companies. And Thrift is a business that is trying to encourage people to buy secondhand rather than buying new clothes, particularly fast fashion. Historically, what's happened is, and by historically, I mean in probably the last 20, 25 years, people have been increasingly going to either very high-end luxury or they've been going to very disposable fast fashion. And the impact of fast fashion on the environment is extremely large. In fact, 10% of all worldwide pollution, man-made pollution, is to do with the fashion industry. It's the second most polluting industry in the world. And so anything we can do...
Oh, God. Apologies. Don't know what's going on there. That completely threw me.
I could wrap this bit if we want, to that reason.
Apologies, I think YouTube just flicked onto the next video. That threw me.
No. And so historically what would happen is that people, and over the last 25 years, we have become accustomed to either buying luxury, or for those who can't buy luxury or don't want to buy luxury, they buy a high street, and they dispose of the clothes a lot more than we used to 40, 50, 60 years ago. And that's having a very large impact on the environment. And at the same time, when people are getting rid of their clothes, most of it goes to landfill, and where the dyes seep out over time and make the grounds toxic in many cases. And in fact, even in the supply chains for fast fashion, there's a lot of an increasing amount of toxicity. So throughout the supply chain and the consumption of fashion, we have a very large human and global world in ecological environmental impact. What thrift allows you to do is, rather than putting all your used clothes in a recycling bag and just chucking them either in the landfill or giving them to a charity shop who probably just recycles them, although great items are sold, you send them to thrift. Thrift price them using an algorithm on the internet that can work out what the best price is for that item, which is often higher than a charity shop can work out. You then choose a charity. Thrift sells it for you, so you can be very time poor. All you need is to get a bag, fill it with your old recycled clothes. Of course, there's a list of the type of clothes they want. They want clothes that typically have brands, and then you just send it off. It's as easy as going to a charity shop, but what the benefit is that the charities that are attached to the site. So when you have an item of clothes that you want to sell through thrift, you choose the charity. So you might typically have a British Heart Foundation shop next to or nearby your house. You want to continue to donate to the British Heart Foundation, but if you send your clothes to thrift instead, thrift will probably price them higher, will give a third of the revenue to the British Heart Foundation, which is more than the British Heart Foundation would actually receive if they sold it through their own shop. And you encourage other consumers to buy secondhand by going to Thrift Plus. So those consumers that may have bought fast fashion are now buying secondhand high quality clothing at a price that's competitive for them and good for other charities, of course, and the environment. And Thrift actually won Dragon's Den last year. And they grew over 950% over COVID. And that was because there was a big shift in the consumer behavior. I'm sure everyone on this call, it happened to them as well. People moved online in their purchasing, and that benefited thrift. And so it's a really fantastic impact and commercial story. Impact because it's tackling one of the largest polluting industries in the world, at the same time as growth, because we've seen 10 times growth or 9.5 times growth over the last year. And so that's a great example of the type of business that the Impact EIS service looks to invest in for your investors, your clients.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you. I totally agree. I love it as an example that basically, that highlights not only the social impact that the investment is delivering, but also the financial potential that this business has to obviously deliver for our investors. Ian, I'm conscious on time. I'm going to try and do the video to the next one as well. I really hope I have better success, but you're going to talk us through Nature-Metrics, aren't you?
That's right, and good luck.
Oh, I'm going to need it.
Nature-Metrics uses genetics to make biodiversity monitoring simple, quick, and cost-effective. The cells of every living thing contain DNA. This is a complex double helix structure made up of millions of nucleotide bases, commonly referred to by the letters A, T, C, and G. The sequence of bases is a code that describes everything about an organism, from its body plan to its eye colour. Certain parts of the code can be used to tell which species an organism belongs to, and these are the regions that we target for our analyses. At Nature-Metrics, we believe that which is measured improves, and we're really proud to be leading the genetic revolution in biodiversity monitoring.
Well done, Jack.
Why did you say that there? Why did you say that there? I was doing so well, and then it bloody played again. Anyway, we have paused now. Oh, that's stressful.
Yeah, no, look, moving on. I can tell you there if I didn't say this. This is a great business. This business was founded by a female founder. That was Dr. Kat Bruce, the founder that was talking, and it's run by a female CEO who's taken over from Kat. It's got over $1 million of revenues last year, despite COVID. It's a science-based business, as you could tell a little bit from the video, with loads of know-how in environmental DNA, basically telling from samples of water and soil what animals and plants, etc., are present in that water and soil, and therefore what are in present in that location. The slide's got lots of sort of nice environmental impact stuff, but one of the keys here is that this business is addressing a big challenge for big businesses. Companies and governments, are increasingly compelled to measure and report on the impact they have on biodiversity and the environment. They're compelled by regulation, by their customers, by pressure groups, by their investors increasingly, even by their bankers sometimes. And it costs them a lot of money, and it costs them customers if they don't comply. Now, historically, checking biodiversity, it's already big business, but the traditional method has been literally requiring to identify each individual species by sight or through binoculars or under a microscope. It just hasn't been scalable. So the Nature solution is you can just take these small samples of water or soil, take them back to the lab, see which species are present from their DNA traces, and it's just much more scalable and cost effective. They've got some real blue chip clients, including HS2, Anglo American, and Repsol. In fact, Repsol, just going to give you a quick anecdote. They have a Peruvian Amazon project, and they did a head-to-head comparison, Repsol with their conventional monitoring techniques. And they found that Nature identified more species in 45 days in the field than their old system of monitoring did in 600 days. So it saved the customer a great deal of time and money. So this is a classic for obvious environmental protection and monitoring impact, but also because it is a science-based product. While it's not software, it doesn't quite have software margins, but it does have very high margins reflecting the know-how and the particular skills that Nature Metrics have got. And we're expecting this business to grow very significantly in the coming years. Back to you, Jack.
No, I was just going to say, it's so interesting because when I watched the video, and it's the first time I've actually heard you speak about Nature Metrics, I was sitting there and going, well, what's the commercial case to this? I can't see it. And that explanation behind corporates just suddenly makes
it's all about, if you want to do a big infrastructure project, obviously if you're HS2, but increasingly in developing countries as well, where organizations that provide the funding like the World Bank, etc., impose standards which these companies have to meet as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. No. Brilliant. Thank you for choosing those two. They were really fantastic examples of what we're trying to do with the service. To that point, I think this draws me into the final couple of slides with regards to a conclusion. I hope that everybody on the call has found it interesting, has found it useful, has found a good background and base grounding for where impact and ESG can really complement and enhance what you're doing with regards to tax efficient investments in the offering. I think one of the great things for us is that we're really trying to lead the way with regards to this. I know there are more people coming on board with regards to offering something in the ESG and impact space when it comes to EIS investment, but we are absolutely at the vanguard of that. And I think for those of you that are looking at this, you do have developed propositions with regards to your mainstream investments for ESG and for impact for those clients that have those kind of considerations. Having an option with regards to your tax efficient proposition for those clients that do have tax planning needs, and are looking and are interested in this style of investment we do really have something that's quite interesting, unique, and different in the market. As Ian and Seb said, and thank you to both of you, we're looking to target inequality, the environment, children and young people, those 4 key sectors derived out of the UN SDGs, and looking to build clients a diversified portfolio between 6 and 10 companies. And to date, we've raised 15 million for the service. And it was at 13 companies, Ian?
That's right. Yeah.
13 companies. I suddenly had a panic that it was 12 for a second. But yeah, that I think leads into the final slide, which is just to cover off our charges, which more than anything I'll leave for people to read in their own time as opposed to reading it out. And then just finally this is a broader suite of our products that we offer here at Triple Point, and I'm not going to dwell on that as that's not the purpose of today. But if you do have any questions with regards to the Impact EIS service or any of the other products that you see on the screen, please do get in touch with your relationship manager, your business development manager at Triple Point. If you aren't aware of who that is, please do contact us on our main line, which you can find on our website, and also our email address. We're more than happy to point you in the right direction of the relevant person at Triple Point who can assist you. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and just if there are any other questions, we will be here and able to answer any of them. But aside from that, a big thank you to all of you for coming in, and we'll hopefully speak to you all very soon. And if not, no questions, then we'll leave it here.